Why were some of the world's best footballers being treated like criminals at the 2026 World Cup? From Africa's referee of the year being held in a cell, to Iran's squad being forced to sleep outside the host country, the 2026 World Cup became a tale of two tournaments. And it all started with a broken promise. It started on June 7, 2026, Raleigh, North Carolina. The Senegal national football team, ranked 14th in the world, African champions, one of the most dangerous squads in the entire tournament, boarded a bus at their hotel. They were flying to San Antonio, Texas for a pre-tournament friendly. Sadio Mané was on that bus. Nicolas Jackson, Ismail Assar, players who earn millions at Europe's biggest clubs. Players whose faces are on billboard advertisements across London, Paris, and Madrid. The bus didn't go to the terminal. It drove directly onto the tarmac. The players stepped off the bus onto the open runway. And then, in front of cameras that would capture every second of what came next, American security personnel descended on the delegation. Bags were opened and turned inside out. Documents were checked. Players were asked to remove their shoes. Handheld metal detector wands were passed over the bodies of the players and coaching staff one by one on the open tarmac in full view of the cameras. The footage went viral within hours. The reaction across Africa was instant and furious. On social media, millions of people watched the video of some of the world's best footballers, men who had been invited to compete at the most prestigious tournament on the planet, standing on a runway with their shoes off and their luggage emptied onto the ground around them. A widely circulated tweet read, "Full tarmac searches, shoes off, bags turned inside out like criminals. This is straight up humiliation and a disgrace." They'd never put white boys through the same. The Senegalese Football Federation moved quickly to contain the damage. They released a statement explaining that the tarmac checks were part of an arrangement to expedite travel, allowing the players to complete security procedures directly at the foot of the aircraft without passing through the terminal, and that the process took place under excellent conditions. But the question that nobody, not the Federation, not FIFA, not the US tournament organizers, ever answered publicly was simple. Did any European team at this World Cup stand on a runway in their socks while their luggage was emptied onto the ground around them? Nobody said yes. In December 2025, President Trump had signed a proclamation restricting entry for nationals of several countries, including Senegal, a move that had already raised fears among Senegalese officials about supporter attendance at the tournament. Even with exemptions for athletes and diplomatic staff, the travel climate surrounding the 2026 World Cup had already marked certain nations differently before a single plane touched down. The players of Senegal put their shoes back on. They boarded their private flight, and they flew to San Antonio to prepare for a World Cup in which they were officially welcomed. June 5, 2026, Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Aymen Hussein had scored the goal that sent Iraq to their first FIFA World Cup in 40 years. That is not a minor achievement. In a region destabilized by war, a region where the Iraqi Football Association had to negotiate entry visas through diplomatic back channels in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, because the US had no embassy in Baghdad, where over 60% of the domestic-based squad had initially been stranded in a conflict zone unable to get safe passage. Aymen Hussein had carried his country through. He had scored in the Intercontinental Playoffs to book Iraq's place, and when Iraqi airspace closed and international flights were suspended, the Mexican government intervened through emergency diplomacy just to get the squad into the tournament at all. When the plane landed at O'Hare, Aymen Hussein was pulled aside. He was detained and questioned by US Customs and Border Protection for 7 hours at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. His phone was examined. His documentation was reviewed. The man whose name was on billboards in Baghdad, whose goal had sent a war-torn nation into celebration, sat in a detention room at a Chicago airport for 7 hours while border officials decided whether to let him in. The team's photographer, Talal Salah, was detained for more than 10 hours before being denied entry altogether. A man whose job was to document Iraq's historic World Cup campaign was put back on a plane. The CBP's official statement described both detentions as part of routine additional inspection. One traveler was admitted, the other was sent home. A CBP spokesperson told media, "All travelers seeking entry into the United States, including athletes, coaches, and staff, are subject to customs and border protection inspection and vetting. Admissibility determinations are made on a case-by-case basis using law enforcement, national security, and immigration information information available at the time of inspection. Aymen Hussein was eventually allowed through. He walked out of O'Hare and into the country that was hosting the World Cup he had bled for. He said nothing publicly about the 7 hours. He had a tournament to prepare for. His team had bigger things to worry about than the feelings of American border officials. But somewhere in that airport, Iraq's tournament photographer was already on a plane home. The visual record of Iraq's first World Cup in 40 years. The images, the moments, the documentation of history would be captured without the man they had chosen to capture it. June 6, 2026, Miami International Airport. Omar Artan arrived at Miami International Airport from Istanbul with everything a man needs to enter a country: a Somali diplomatic passport, a valid U.S. visa, FIFA accreditation, identifying him as one of 52 officially selected referees for the 2026 World Cup. Official documentation from the Confederation of African Football, which had named him their referee of the year just months earlier. Documents confirming he had become the first person from Somalia to referee a continental final when he took charge of the 2025 CAF Champions League final. He had done everything right. He had earned his place. And the 2026 World Cup needed him. He was among the 52 referees selected for an expanded tournament of 104 games, an increase of 16 from Qatar 2022. When he landed, traveling on a Somali diplomatic passport with FIFA documentation, he was pulled aside for additional inspection and then denied entry. Artan told the New York Times he was interviewed at the Miami airport for 11 hours by border officials, who asked him why he traveled to the U.S. and questioned him about Somali politics and the Al-Shabaab militant group. He showed them FIFA documentation and photos from his refereeing career. After the questioning, he was put in a holding cell and sent back on a plane to Istanbul. The U.S. government's response, delivered through the White House's own World Cup Task Force Director Andrew Giuliani, was simple. Anyone who is communicating with bad actors that plan harm against the United States of America are not gonna be admitted entrants, Giuliani said. An anonymous Trump administration official stated that Artan had associated with suspected members of terror organizations. Omar Artan's response was equally simple. "I think that they have a problem with my country," he told the New York Times. "I showed them my documentation. I wasn't told why I was refused." A Somali member of parliament asked the question that millions of people around the world were asking. If these concerns about an individual's links to terror organizations were genuine, why were they not identified during the visa process? He had already been vetted by the U.S. Department of State. They had already given him the visa. He had followed every procedure. He had done everything right. And then, at the airport, the door was closed in his face. FIFA issued a statement saying they were not involved in host country immigration processes and that Artan will be unable to train and officiate at the FIFA World Cup 2026. The Confederation of African Football said they were deeply saddened. British Columbia's premier publicly offered to have Artan referee matches in Vancouver. The suggestion was quietly rejected because FIFA required all referees to train together at a hub in Florida, a hub in the United States, a country that had just refused him entry. When Artan arrived back in Mogadishu, thousands of people packed a stadium to welcome him. Government officials greeted him with flowers. He was hoisted onto shoulders, draped in the Somali flag, and received as a national hero by a country that recognized what the rest of the world had witnessed. A man who had earned everything through talent and discipline had been turned away not because of what he had done, but because of where he was born. "I will attend the next World Cup," he told the crowd. June 7, 2026, Tijuana, Mexico. Iran's national football team landed at Tijuana International Airport at 5 in the morning, exhausted from an overnight flight from Turkey. They were not in the United States. They were in Mexico, specifically in Tijuana, the border city that sits directly across from San Diego, California, separated from the World Cup host nation by a fence. Their tournament, their matches, their stadiums, all of them were on the other side of that fence. The requirement to base themselves in Mexico was imposed as part of the team's visa conditions by the U.S. State Department. The saga that led to this moment had begun months earlier, in February 2026, when the United States and Israel attacked Iran, making this the first World Cup in nearly 100 years of history where a host nation was at war with a participating team. Iran's original base camp, a sports complex in Tucson, Arizona, had been abandoned. Their training camp was moved to Turkey, where players and staff attended visa appointments at the U.S. Embassy in Ankara. The players' visas came through on June 6th, just 10 days before their first match, but several members of the support squad were denied visas, including key managerial and administrative members, according to the Iranian Football Federation. Iran's embassy in Turkey confirmed that 15 administrative and management staff had been denied visas and described the treatment as deliberate and discriminatory behavior escalated to the highest level. Iran's Football Federation President Mehdi Taj, a man whose job was to run the organization that was competing in the World Cup, was himself among those denied entry. He had been refused entry to Canada for the FIFA Congress due to his alleged links to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which the US and Canada classify as a terrorist entity. Then came the match days. Iran's schedule across the group stage compressed impossible logistics into 12 days, with no overnight recovery at any venue and a support staff already reduced by visa denials. Iran captain Mehdi Tarmac confirmed that the team endured 5 hours of travel and security checks during what is normally a short trip from Tijuana to the Los Angeles area. After Iran drew 2-2 with New Zealand in a politically charged match in Los Angeles, the situation became even more extraordinary. Following their 2-2 group stage draw against New Zealand, Iran was reportedly ordered by U.S. officials to return to their training camp in Tijuana immediately, rather than the following day as had been previously planned. That is a World Cup team, having just played 90 minutes of high-intensity football on the biggest stage in the sport, being told to get in vehicles and cross an international border in the middle of the night rather than sleep in their hotel rooms. Iran's coach Amir Gailnoui confirmed his team had been ordered to leave the U.S. and return to Mexico within hours of the final whistle. Even the single-entry visa of winger Mahdi Torabi, an unused substitute in the match against New Zealand, expired the moment he left the United States for Tijuana. The Iranian Football Federation had to negotiate directly with FIFA to have a multi-entry visa reissued so he could play in their next game against Belgium. A footballer, unused, not even on the pitch for a second. His visa canceled the moment he crossed the border in the middle of the night because his country's team was not permitted to sleep in the tournament host nation. The ACLU put it with clinical precision in a formal travel advisory they issued to anyone attending the 2026 World Cup. They listed the risks facing international travelers as including arbitrary denial of entry, invasive social media screening and searches of electronic devices, violent and unconstitutional immigration enforcement, including racial profiling, and cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment while in ICE detention or custody. This was not a warning issued by activists. It was a warning issued by America's own oldest civil liberties organization, directed at visitors to a tournament that America was hosting. One professor who wrote an entire book about the 2026 World Cup described it with a single phrase that went around the world. I view the 2026 World Cup as a massive paradox. On one hand, it has more teams than ever participating. On the other hand, because of the policies of the Trump administration, it looks more like a World Cup of exclusion than inclusion. This is what it looked like in the days before the 2026 FIFA World Cup. A Senegalese squad, some of the finest footballers on the planet, standing on an airport runway in their socks with their bags emptied at their feet. An Iraqi striker who had carried his war-torn nation to a historic qualification, sitting alone in a room at Chicago O'Hare for 7 hours while officials decided if he was worthy of entering the country. Africa's Referee of the Year, a man with a diplomatic passport, a valid visa, and a FIFA badge, interrogated for 11 hours about Somali politics, and then loaded onto a flight home while thousands of people in Mogadishu waited to receive him as a national hero. Iran's national team crossing an international border in the middle of the night after a World Cup match because they were not permitted to sleep in the host country, with one player's visa expiring the moment he left U.S. soil. A travel ban affecting citizens of 39 countries, including World Cup participants Haiti, Iran, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, had prevented most ordinary fans from those nations from obtaining visas to attend the matches of their own teams. A separate program had initially required fans from 5 African nations to pay deposits of up to $15,000 just to apply for a visa bond, a financial barrier that most families on the continent could not come close to meeting. FIFA's response to all of it, a statement confirming they were not involved in host country immigration processes. Gianni Infantino had promised that everyone would be welcome. What nobody mentioned at the time was that everyone has always meant something different depending on where you were born, and that at the 2026 FIFA World Cup, the biggest and most inclusive tournament in the history of the sport, that difference had never been more more visible, or more documented, or more damning. The ball rolled, the matches were played, and somewhere in Mogadishu, a man who had earned the right to be there watched the World Cup on television that he was supposed to officiate in a country that had already told him, with a holding cell and a return flight, exactly what it thought of him.